Hey, welcome to our channel. I'm sure you've noticed we've decided to rebrand it away from the ancient to modern and just rebrand it as our Mundelein Church of the Nazarene channel. A couple different things here. We don't want this to be just an internal channel. We want this to be welcome to anyone, and we want this channel to reflect our unique voice. I'm not talking about unique, the Mundelein part, but the Church of the Nazarene. We are a Wesleyan denomination, and we want that to be reflected. I'm not sure there's a lot of strong Wesleyan voices out there, so a lot of what we hear does not really reflect our theological heritage, which is much more vibrant and strong than I think we realize. So this is, I think, episode 22 of our journey through the New Testament, and we've also decided to we've started to air our sermons on this channel as well. So you're going to see some of our sermons that we do on Sunday morning. The good ones anyway. The bad ones we'll just hide. They'll never see the light of day. We won't waste anybody's time with them, but you'll start to see those on this channel as well. Last week we did episode 21, and we were just doing a little background to Paul's letter to the Philippians and letter to the Colossians. And I want to spend a little time today with one of the background issues in Paul's letter to the Colossians. Most people think that Colossians, at some level, is in dialogue with an ancient system of thought called Gnosticism. Now, this is quite a matter of debate today. The question is, to what extent is Gnosticism present, and to what extent is Paul influenced by Gnosticism? You will find people that claim that Paul was a Gnostic himself. I think that is really wrong. And let me explain why. Gnosticism is the word that we use to describe this thought system that comes from the Greek world. If you know anything about the Greek world, it had a very dualistic way of looking at the world. So it separated the physical world from the spirit world. It's a larger Platonic system. So some of us are of the age we know when maybe in a previous generation someone had a relationship with someone from the opposite sex, and you'd say, no, it's just Platonic, meaning there was no physical romantic activity. The body was not involved. That's what most of these Greek philosophical systems were all about. They thought that everything physical was a reflective of the evil world, and everything spirit, the thought world, your inner spirit was good. Now, in this thought world, there's a lot of variations of this, so we're just going to try to give a basic down-the-middle approach. The center of this divine spirit world was called the pleroma. The pleroma is a Greek word that simply means fullness, completeness. Well, we find that word in Colossians. We don't find it in Paul's other letters, but it's here. Pleroma. It's this spirit world was made up of eternal beings, and sometimes they were called aeons or archons. But anyway, they just consisted of this. They were what the spirit world was consisted of. Well, at some point, one of these eternal beings became out of balance with the rest of the pleroma, the fullness. So it was no longer a perfect representation, and so this one eternal being was kicked out of the pleroma. This fallen, evil being in the Gnostic world was named Yahweh. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. That's God's name from the Old Testament, and you are right. And Yahweh, even in this Gnostic world, was the being that created all the physical world that we see, created the heavens and the earth, and created all humanity, and filled this physical world with humanity, these physical beings. However, in each and every person in the Gnostic world, there remained a spark of the divine. But that spark is blocked by our physical bodies. And so the way we get in touch with that part of the world is by just getting rid of as much physicality, the physical world, as we can. So we must overcome our physical selves in order to gain salvation. And you gain salvation by getting a knowledge of that spark that's within us. So if you just let that inner spark come out, well, you're advancing in the Gnostic world. Now, why are we spending so much time with discussing this Gnosticism? Because Gnosticism is as present today as it has ever been. And it's probably more present today than it was 30, 40 years ago. Let me show you a couple different ways. And I bet you've heard or engaged in some of these conversations. The first one is this. You might hear someone, an older relative, say it. Jesus will rescue me from this old physical body. I will leave this world someday. You know, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. One of the old spirituals said that. Maybe you've been at a funeral and you've heard someone say, oh, Aunt Margaret is looking down on me right now. Her spirit is now free. Now, all those might be nice thoughts. And I'm not trying to purposely stretch you, but let me just tell you one thing here. All of these are Gnostic ideas. They're not Christian ones. The New Testament and 2,000 years of Christian tradition does not tell you that you will be rescued from the body, but that your body will be renewed and restored and be remade. This world will not be left behind, but it will be renewed and restored, a new heavens and the new earth. And we don't believe that resurrection involves just our spirit, that we're drifting through the world, but it actually involves our whole being, the bodily resurrection. So that's one way Gnosticism has infiltrated our world, even our Christian world. Here's a second way. You hear some people, and this is maybe not mainstream Christian thought, but it's out there. I'm receiving a word of knowledge from God. Jesus is directly communicating everything I need to know, and he's doing it to me. And so if I say, wait a minute, maybe you need to rethink that, our response is, how dare you tell me differently? God is directly communicating with me. I'm living my true, authentic self. You know, that's a nice sounding thought. But most of us have realized that there's a lot in our true, authentic self that's just not that pleasant and not that worthy to pursue. I had a wise, very godly grandmother tell me once, and she was probably 86 when she told me. She said, grandson, the older I get, the more I realize how far short I've fallen from the ideal. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. All of these are Gnostic, even if they have a shade of truth to them. God does communicate with us, but not alone. We are part of a larger church. We're part of a larger community. We need each other. We must be accountable. We're not separated from everyone that's come before. We affirm 2,000 years of tradition. We affirm history. We affirm reason. We affirm what we find in Scripture. And we also, at times, we might hear a little bit of the voice of God, but not a voice of God that's different from these other areas that we've just said. Just this morning, I saw something, it was another Gnostic idea. Someone was saying that a story in the Bible needs to be maybe not taken seriously because it represents the patriarchy. It was the Esther story in the Old Testament, and it's violent and involves a king, so we have to be very careful. That's a bit of Gnosticism there. Scripture, even its lessons, come to us in a physical world. Jesus was fully human. So when we take a biblical story, we have a text that's both fully divine, but it's incarnational, and that it's also wrapped up in humanity. So we have to take its real physical setting, its real physical world, and find the meaning in that world before we bring it to ours. To just think that there's some direct communication that's separate from every physical description is kind of Gnostic in and of itself. So anyway, as we look through Colossians and read when Paul writes, the fullness of God is represented in Jesus Christ, he's really attacking a Gnostic thought. And it says this fullness is out there somewhere else. And Paul is saying, no, everything you need to know about God is fully housed in the person and character and life of Jesus Christ. Hopefully it helps you as you read through Colossians. Hey, continue to join us. Subscribe to the channel. Like us. Please send us a challenge, an opposing opinion, a question, tell us that we got it wrong so we can have a discussion. We'll be happy to take up those challenges and those questions later. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you back here next week.